London with the 12th Armored Division ACU project, and it's September the 12th, 1998. I'm here with Felix Sokolowski, and he was with the A43rd. Okay, let's just start off with where you were born, and if you could tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Okay, I was born April 20th, 1921 in Hammond, Indiana. To my parents were Alex and Josephine Sokolowski, both immigrants of Lithuania. They met when they come to this country and got married. They never knew each other. And let's see, I lived there till I was of the age of 2 years old, and then we migrated across the state line because Hammond, Indiana bordered a town of Calumet City, which is south of Chicago, about a half-hour ride. And my dad had a tavern and a dance hall business, so we had the home in Hammond, and we had an apartment adjacent to our business. So they moved there, and we lived there in the apartment. Plus, I think it was 1926. My dad was a carpenter by trade, and he built his own home with the help of some of his friends. And then we moved to Calumet City itself, and then we lived there. Like I would say, then I would go on if you wanted me to say so. But my mother had a baby brother, and he lived till about he was, I think, 6 years old, and he died from a ruptured appendix. And actually, what I should go back and say is I lived during the era of Prohibition and Depression, and then my dad lost the businesses. Everything went to pot, so to speak. So we became frugal, and then things sort of bad things hit. My mother got sick, and then my dad was in an automobile accident, and we sort of surmised that my mom would be the first one to go. But my dad passed away my brother passed away in 1931, and my dad in 1932, and then my mother was sick till and I was the man in the house at the age of 12, and then my mother passed away when I was a junior in high school, and I lived with my Uncle Bruno, and he was my godfather, and then they made a legal guardian. Even though I was 17, he became my legal guardian. And I lived with him. Naturally, we lost the home, 8-room bungalow. And from there on, 1940, I went to work after I graduated. Do you want me to tell you about my schooling?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone's at the door.
Am I doing okay this way, or just,
great.
you know?
Yeah, this is what I want to know. Jason's supposed to do the camera.
Educational background. I mean, I went to a public school for 4 years, Lincoln School in Calumet City, Illinois, and then my parents transferred me over to a Catholic parochial school, St. Andrews, and I finished the other 4 years. And upon graduation, I went to Thornton Fractional North, which they called TF North High School. Graduated from high school, and then I sort of lollygagged around for about, I think, a year or so. And finally, I got hired at the Press Steel Car Company in Chicago, and they were building Army tanks in one department, and I worked in the shell department where they were forging 75-millimeter shells. So I started off as a laborer, and I think I was there just about 6 months, and then they put me on the inspection line, and so then I worked on the inspection line for like a little bit over 2 years, and then I became a man. I turned 21, you know. So I had to register for the draft. I registered right after my birthday, and in October, and I think October the 15th. No, it was November. I received the final induction papers, and then the early part of October, they transported us to Camp Grant, where we got our uniforms, our shots. We were there about 3 days. Then they put us on a train, and we traveled all night. And we come into a place God only knew what it was. It was raining, and it was dark, dismal, and they had all the shades down, so because we were troops, so to speak. We got out, and they put us in GI trucks, and they drove us in this torrential storm. We come into this camp, which incidentally became Camp Campbell, Kentucky, and they had no landscaping. Everything was red clay. We jumped out with our nice clean GI boots, and then they marched us over to a barrack. We walked into this barrack. The floor was nice, clear white pine floor, and a young character who was in there with his like a T-shirt, and he says, "Come on in, boys." And he said, "Take a bunk," and he says, "When y'all gets all settled," he says, "I'll be back." And he's come back, and he says, "Tomorrow morning we fall out." He said, "But before you fall out, I want this floor cleaned the way you saw it when we came in." But anyway, that's where we got our basic training. We went through basic training. After the basic training, we went on we had maneuvers in Tennessee there, and that was in 1943. After maneuvers, which was about October, we were shipped after the end of the maneuvers. We were shipped to Camp Barkley.
What do you remember about maneuvers?
Maneuvers, I think, were worse than combat when you come down to a point, you know. Although we didn't have to sweat out, so to speak, the shells and firing and everything, but they gave us sea rations and everything, but they told us don't eat them unless it's necessary. So what we had to do a lot of times on a sneak would be going through some of these little country villages. I'd sneak over to a little store, general store, something, buy some crackers and some milk and stuff in general, you know. And what we would do, we would travel for like 3 days or 2 days on a problem, and then we probably they had the mess hall following us, and then they would ship it to us, and then we'd have to eat it. By the time it got to us, it was cold. So I mean, and then it was rainy continually. So, and going up and down these mountains and going around in the dark, we'd travel in a convoy, and they'd have those red slit lights on the back of these tanks, our vehicles, and we'd be right close together. That's all you could see. And when you went over that same route the next day, I mean, you'd shudder to see where you went, because there was cliffs on the side, you know, embankments. So you sort of get sweat on your forehead. You think, well, man, we just got through going through there, you know. So that was one reason. I mean, and the weather was just terrible.
Oh man, that's scary.
Yes.
So you left maneuvers.
Then we went to Camp Campbell, and then we continued our further training.
What was the train ride? Do you remember the train ride to Camp Barkley?
Let me see. The train ride, yes. Let's see. When we left Tennessee, we went through Louisiana, Mississippi, Texarkana, and Texas, and then we headed up to the Panhandle, where Abilene is. It was quite a long trip, because most of the time, I mean, they'd have to sidetrack and let the freight trains come by and everything. but you got used to it.
So you got to Camp Barkley.
Yes.
What went on there?
Well, like I say, when we came into Camp Barkley, we just continued our various problems. We go on different various problems, and they give us additional instructions in whatever we had to do, and preparing us for combat. Actually, it was nothing more out of the ordinary than what we went through back over in basics, after the basics. And we had to maintain, first echelons of maintenance of our equipment, our vehicles, and it was a long time, and everybody was anxious to find out when we were going to go overseas. In fact, that at one time, and it was in early part of 43. Yeah, 43. We were. They were thinking. What they did, they took some of the men out of our group and formed another group, 44 Tank Battalion, and they shipped them. We found out later on they shipped them, and they ended up in the Pacific. And I was fortunate. I was a corporal, and they were taking most of the privates and PFCs. They weren't taking any of us corporals to go into that group. And then 1944, last part of August, we cleaned our barracks out and everything, and then we slept out in an area adjacent to where the barracks were, and we slept in our pup tents, I think a couple days or so, and then after that they just hauled us away to the railroad station and put us on trains there, and they shipped us down to Camp Shanks. No, not Camp Shanks. Camp Shanks. I think it was Camp Shanks. Let me think. When you get old, you forget some of those things.
Camp Shanks was in New York. Is that?
Yeah, Camp Shanks. Because when we came back, it was Camp Kilmer. Yeah, Camp Shanks, and we stayed there. I think just about a week, and then we embarked on. It was one of these. Kaiser was building these transport ships, and the name of the ship was S. Santa Cecilia. Yep, it was Santa Cecilia, and in fact they even had some of the cargo below, and there was our company, a company of 43rd Tank Battalion, and then there was a company of engineers that built the Alaskan Highway. They also were on this, and then down below, like I say, they had tanks and jeeps and things in general, and that was a 14-day trip, because we never knew this, but the convoy, I mean, it was huge, and they had to keep zigzagging so they could, avoid the submarines. And when we were on this trip going, there was about 4 of us guys that we formed a quartet, and that's what we used to do. Myself, a guy by the name of Sabala, Glendy, and myself, Sabala, Glendy, and Dargavel. And what we would do after we have our chow, we just lean on the rail and watch the waves and everything, and then just sing songs. The other guys were playing poker and everything on the thing, and it got a little boring, and some of the guys were getting sick. I didn't get seasick going that way. Coming back was a different horse of a color. And what was it? One time, the Captain Kelly came up to myself and a fellow by the name of Amrine, and he said, "You guys, him and I used to put on company party shows, and little things. He was with the band, and I was a ham from school. I was a school. How would you say, class clown? And so we put on a little show, on the poop deck, so to speak. We had one of my crew, Ted Fitchick, was also initially from the band, and he was a drummer, so he had pipe plates out there and knives and forks. And let's see, and Ted Fitchick was another guy from my crew. He played the trumpet. So we put on a sort of an old-time vaudeville show. We had a few guys that came out and sang songs and everything, and I guess they enjoyed it because they wanted more. And then after we got, it seemed like it was forever and a day before we got there. We landed. Initially, we were supposed to land in Liverpool, but then they changed the route, and we went into Wales, and we landed in Swansea, Wales. From Swansea, Wales, we went to Tidworth, England, and then we had to clean all of the Cosmoline off of all of our equipment, our guns, and get our tanks and vehicles together. So we spent about another week and a half or so, I think, in Tidworth.
Can I ask you
Sure.
a question? I have just a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Before you went to Shanks, let me get back to Barkley real quick.
Okay.
If that's okay. Being the class clown and a ham, did y'all ever do any recreation stuff like that at Camp Barkley? Yeah,
when we had these company parties, when we got paid, there was $1 or so went in a kitty, so to speak, for our annual, not annual, I think, but every quarterly or so we'd have a company party in one of the, I forgot what they call, rec halls or something. So they'd have music there, and they brought I remember the one time they brought these pretty girls out. They called them the Abilene Bluebonnet girls. You know, they were dressed in this blue dresses and all that. They came out there. You know, they were like for dancing. You know, and make the guys feel a little bit more happier. Though most of us were missing some were the wives, the other guys were missing their sweethearts, so to speak. And we ended up, myself and Amrine and some of the other goofballs, we ended up singing on a stage and things like that in general. Because I did this when I was in high school too. But nothing panned out of it.
Okay, and then I guess I wanted to ask you about the Cosmoline, because I was talking to someone earlier, and he told me that they put that on to protect.
It's a preservative, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How did you get it off?
Well, we used the height. They were using the high octane gas that we used in our vehicles. But and we were doing this in the barracks. It wasn't barracks. This was like a apartment complex, and we had little sections of it, you know. And it had like a kitchenette, a little bathroom, and then they also had your eating area and a dining area, and each room had a little fireplace. And what happened, we were cleaning ours, and we didn't have a fire going or nothing in there because it was dangerous. Well, the fellas next one, they had a fire going, and this was all wooden floors, and they were washing these things down, you know, with this gasoline, and it got in the crevices of the floor, and all of a sudden we heard a zoom. So we ran out of our place. And then I seen 3 or 4 fellas come out of the building over there. I couldn't even recognize them. They were all scalded, burnt, and everything. I think there was Dick Tyler, Hayes, Tom Shaw, and Lisner. Those 4 were the worst, you know, that were burnt. They ended up in a hospital, and we went to see them the next day, and they looked like mummies. They had their faces and heads all wrapped up and everything. So I remember that, you know, distinctly, you know, what happened. So they were told, you don't use and have a fireplace and use a high octane gas. Then we had we had to go and do our exercises in the morning and then our drills, what have you, to keep us occupied and waiting for the time when we embark across to France. And we left France in, let me think, I don't want to make a mistake. I think it was the last part of September, or was it October? Yeah. And we went on these LSTs, we'd put the tanks in there and the troops, and we drove across the channel. It was sort of choppy. And then I think it just took, I don't know how many hours to get across. There was no problem. The boys cleared the way for us away in June. And then we took off and we drove and drove. I think we landed there, it was just dawn. And we drove all the way to a town of, I think it was Offay? Yeah, I think it was Offay. And then we stayed there for about a week. And then we continued on. After that, we continued on. This is when we started going into battle. And our first encounter of battle was in the Sainbush area. Not Sainbush, I'm sorry, Singling and Benning. It's B-I-N-G, I know that. And we were leaving the 4th Armored Division in the Maginot Line. And it was scary, believe me, And any guy that says that they weren't afraid, I mean, they're putting on a facade, because everybody had a fear of some kind. And our first casualty was a young fella who was a literate fella from Georgia, and because I used to write letters for him home. And then I had a friend of ours where I lived in Calumet City, and I sent her his address, and I told her to write to him. So she would write to him, and in the meantime I'd have to read the letters to him, and then I'd have to write the letters for him to her. It was kind of, well, he was the first one that got killed. And then we found out after that evening, we found out that Colonel Meggs got killed, which was a shock. I mean, I idolized the man. The man was nice, tall, handsome, strictly a GI. But he also was an officer for the men all the way through. So, well, let's see what we do then.
What were your feelings as you went into combat for the first time? I mean, what is your first memory of
the first memory when we were getting close to combat, and we could hear the shells and all that firing. I mean, it gave you an empty feeling in your stomach, and you start thinking, well, this is it. What am I going to do? And most of the guys, I mean, were afraid that they will disgrace themselves by turning chicken. You know what I mean? Or get scared, afraid. Well, we all had a little, like I say before, I don't want to be repetitious, we all had a fear. I don't care how many times you encountered combat. I mean, little by little, you sort of shook it off a little bit, especially when you seen your own bodies of your own fellas laying, like we seen over there in a Maginot Line. That was the first time when I seen some infantry boys laying there in the Maginot Line. It was scary. And after that battle, like I say, we were pulled back in what they call now reserve, and got our equipment back in shape, cleaned everything, and we had to keep everything spick and span, and make sure that the weapons were working properly. And then we went to I remember this. Thanksgiving Day, we were located out in an open field. Our platoon itself, and they brought us chow. And here we were back, the same thing like they must have known it. That's why they were training us in the rainy Tennessee, because we had rain continually till December, I think, when it actually turned cold, you know. But it rained, and we went and got our chow. Then we came to eat, and we were eating with our raincoats on, and there was no cover. And all the rain would be coming into your mess kit, and all the food would be overflowing out of the mess kit there. And we were watching the cows out there in the pastures in the rain at the time, and it was a sentimental thing. Here we are, away from home, Thanksgiving Day. Then you think back. I did anyway. I thought back of, with the family having Thanksgiving dinner and all that. Even then, I didn't have much of a family, just my uncle, but I would go to my relatives, my aunts and uncles and all that thing. And then, like I say, from there, we went to, let's see, December. I think the last part of December, we were detached. Our company was detached from the battalion, and we went north. We went to a town they called Singbush. Oh, now I'm backtracking now. I'm backtracking to Christmas Day. We were in a town, I think it was Forbach. And me and my crew were in a old big building. Was an apartment building. There was nothing in there. No furniture was abandoned. We were in there, and we just got through eating our Christmas dinner. And my buddy Amrine, the other Ham, the actor, what do you call it? He had a flashlight, and he was putting on a little finger, shadow thing on, and throwing his voice, so to speak, like a puppet on a wall. And we had some wine that we were drinking, and this was about 11 o'clock at night, and the runner from our company was Hogan, Bob Hogan. He came in there and he says, "Soki, you're wanted at the CP." So all of the sergeant went to the CP, and they told us that we have to pack up and move. We're moving north, and this is when the bulge was on. See, we didn't even know there was this thing like bulge. All we knew was what was in front of our noses. Nobody told us anything. We were told, "You're going this way, you're going that way," and that was it. We didn't have no inkling of we didn't get no newspapers. Once in a while we got the Stars and Stripes. And the bulge was going on at the time. So we were moved up to this area they call Sargamins, the Sargamines or Sargamins. This one company of tankers, and there was a company with Captain Kelly and First Lieutenant Wood. And then there was a company of artillery. I don't know which one was one of the 493rd or whatever. And we went there, and what we were doing, we were simulating or putting on what would you call God, I'm trying to think of the word. That there was a division still there, a decoy, like a decoy. And we'd go out with our platoons, and we'd just set up and then shoot into little towns, and then we'd pack up and move further down and just kept going up and back. And in the meantime, the artillery was doing the same thing. We did that, well, I think we were there until New Year's, and after New Year's we came back, traveled all the way back to the Alsace-Lorraine sector. And then we were with Patch, General Patch, 7th Army, and we were actually in reserve in this town of Rohrbach. And There was this all vineyards. They were making wine over there. So when we pulled into this town, and one of the people were very, very, very hospitable. And one old Frenchman came up to me and he started telling me in French, and I told him I no parlez-vous. And he showed the house, and he said, meaning, go in there, this is your house. So myself and my crew, we went in and we had the second story. And I forgot who was down in the other story. So we stayed in there. I forgot. It must have been about maybe 3-4 days or something like that. And then finally we got notice to get ready, get our gears and everything. We get ready, and then we were going to go to take. Our objective was this town of Offendorf, and adjacent to the Steinwald Woods. And we were supposed to be backing up or flanking the 66th Infantry Battalion. And then I think we had some engineers on each tank. We had about four or five engineers on the back in a motor compartment. And not engineers, infantry. And so we moved out. The funny thing that happened to me, a fellow that I was drafted, we both went into the service together, and we drove on the bus to Camp Grant and everything. We came on a train together, and we got into Camp Campbell, and we got separated. I went to the tank outfit, and he went to the 66th Infantry. And we seen ourselves occasionally on the camp. And then getting back to this area now, these infantry boys were coming by, and I was standing up on the tank there and looking down, and I was saying, "Good luck, guys! Good luck, guys!" And then all of a sudden, I heard somebody. My nickname was Phil, and the only one that knew me by Phil was somebody from Calumet City. So I looked down, and here this fellow Matthew Orzel. So I jumped down, we hugged each other, and he says, I asked him how he's doing. He says, fine. We talked a little while, and then they had to keep moving. And I says, good luck. So he moved on. And then our tanks moved on, and as we moved on, they were moving down in towards the woods, and we were flanking them on the left. And all of a sudden, they waited till these guys got the infantry boys got out there in the marshland that was frozen and snow all over it, and they waited and they started shooting, and then you could see these fellas going down. So we were moving ahead. I think B Company was ahead of us, and C Company, and we were in the third platoon behind them along a dried out, to me it was a dried out creek bed. And so I told I got my gunner, I traversed my weapon, and we traversed it towards the woods there, and I said, we'll throw some HEs in there. And we were throwing these HEs, and then once in a while we throw some armored piercing maybe by God's luck we would hit something. We were, just shooting in despair. And then all of a sudden, all I remembered, it was like a sort of a thud, and I thought I was imagining things. And then I heard like a roar that whizzed by someplace in this general area over my head, because I was a tank commander, and I mean, this much of me is always shown out of the tank. And my driver, George Skeels, jumped up through his hatch, and he started pointing to the front of our tank. So I jumped to take a look to see what was the problem. And they had tow shackles on each side of the tank. So what happened, it was like this. An 88 hit in there, went over my head. And that really scared me. When you're thinking, this thing came over and made that noise. I mean, how close? I mean, see, that's what happened to Captain or Colonel, Colonel Meggs it decapitated his, 88, he can just cut his head right off, and I mean, I thought about that. And so we kept, I said to Skeels, pull back. He pulled back. In the meantime, here's somebody else is pulling back, real fast, and it was Dargable from our platoon. And he says, he jumped out of the tank. He says, did you get hit? I says, well, I just got hit with a toe shackle. He says, look at me. And right in the corner of each tank, they had where they kept parts for the tracks. He had a hole that came in on an angle one way, came out the other way, just like a guy burning with a torch, burning a acetylene torch right through, and disintegrated whatever was in there, the track parts and everything. And he says when he seen that going through there, he just pulled back. So we stayed back there for a while, and then they told us, they called us on the radio, and they told us to form a perimeter, and just hold ground, because we had, I think, to me, I remember seeing about a half a dozen, if not more, of our tanks were burning up ahead, and it was getting close to nighttime, and then we were called to the CP again that Colonel Nick Novosel had set up. And then he told us that they have change of plans, that we were going to move east towards this town of Herlisheim, and we were going to go in and around between the town and the Rhine River. And the 17th Infantry Battalion was supposed to come in from the east, from the west-east, and we were supposed to meet in there. And they told me, this is why I was a little bitter, and to this day, is they told us that we would only encounter a minute amount of resistance, and such as a regiment maybe of grenadiers and a regiment of infantry, and that was it. And we had quite a few of our tanks lost already when we got there. In fact, from our platoon, there was 2 of our tanks were gone, and there was just myself, Tom Shaw, and Madrak. That was it. And incidentally, my lieutenant didn't even end up there. That's a long story if you want to hear it. When we were in the process of moving up, along this dried out bed creek, and I got as soon as the firing started over there, I got a call on the radio, and they said, "Soki, I have to go back because my solenoid on the 75 millimeter gun is jammed. It won't work." He says, "So you guys take over." I said, "Okay, Tom Shaw," and we said, Madrak said, "Okay." And in the meantime, in fact, he was just a rookie lieutenant. He came in to replace, which I forgot to tell. That's another sign of old age. When we were in the Maginot Line, one of the casualties we had, Lieutenant Clark, our platoon leader, his tank was hit, and there was, I think there was Cullen, the assistant gunner, and Buckingham, and were killed. And the driver Rodriguez, he got out of it, and so did the assistant driver. But Lieutenant Clark got hit, and he flew out of the tank. So I jumped out of the tank, and it was muddy after a hard rain, and I was running towards the tank, and Madrak was doing the same thing from his tank. Well, I didn't get that far. I got so far, and all of a sudden I seen the mud splashing up. Somebody was shooting at me. So I hit the mud, and I crawled back. To me it seemed like 100 yards, but it wasn't. And it was full of mud, and I couldn't take a chance going up to hatch. Not the but the hatch. So I had him open up the escape hatch, and I went crawled through the escape hatch back into their place. And then I watched everything what transpired from the turret. And what they did, they got another tank, and they took Lieutenant Clark, put Lieutenant Clark on the back of the tank, and they hauled him back. And then we stayed in our tanks all that night. And then when we woke up the next morning, we had our first snowfall. It was snow. That was one thing that I forgot. I mean, I'm sorry that I'm jumping from one to the other. And another funny encounter after that, Tom Shaw, we were one at a time, we'd leave our position to go and gas up. They had gas trucks back there. So Tom Shaw went and he came back. No, Tom Shaw went. I went first. I came back. Madrak went, and then Tom Shaw came. And when he came back, it was dark already. And he couldn't see. He couldn't see where we were, and he kept calling us on a radio. He said, "Soki, where you at?" And I said, "Well, I'm right here." And I hear I'm looking, I can't see nothing. All I hear is this the sound of the tank going around in circles. And this is when I felt the snow coming down. And he's going around in circles. And I says, "Why don't you just stop and stay where you're at till dawn?" So the next day when we seen it was like a racetrack. Where he was going around and around circles, and he was not too far away. Maybe about like 20 yards around. And he just kept going racetrack. But then after we got through there, and then we went back. And that's when we went back to going to I think it was Rohrbach. And from Rohrbach we continued on, like I say, to Rohrbach, and went to the Sargamans. And came back, but then here we are. We're continuing on to our destination at Herlisheim, and we got just got to where our objective was, and as the fog lifted, it was foggy, and the fog lifted a little bit, and they told us G2 told us also that we would would come across into a forest. Well, as the what you call it, fog lifted and dawn, dawn came on. I turned around, I looked, and all it looked like a crabapple tree orchard or a fruit orchard, just fruit trees. So all of the various B company, C company, and our company, we set up our platoons along the outer edge of the town, facing into the town, and we barely got in position, and all of a sudden the tanks start blowing up and all around. I seen one tank go. That must have been Major Green. I don't know. He was in that vicinity. And then Captain Gregory, I think he was. He was from B Company, B Company. And so I seen this going on. I didn't know what to do. So I figured, I turned around, I looked, I said, well, the Rhine River's back there. So I surmised that they might have been with their tanks in that area. So we swiveled our 75 up in that area, and I says, Gulick, I said, throw in some HEs in that direction, see what we can do. In the meantime, these tanks are being blown up. This is reminding me that you go to these arcades and these kids are shooting at these different things. Well, it was similar to that. I mean, but it was real. It was real. And then, so I decided. It came to my mind. If you're in such danger, move someplace and make yourself a low silhouette. So I took off and went around all where these tanks were. I went around because I seen a big 2-story building and some other buildings that were adjacent to a main road going into town with a single-track railroad track. So we went around, and then I found this area off. It was like a drainage ditch and it was low. So we pulled up in that area, just away and cover from the 2-story building. And in the meantime, there's Captain Kelly. He was standing by this building, and he's motioning to me. He's yelling to me. So I ran over to him, and my crew would never like that because I was always getting out of the tank or to do some reconnoitering, you know, and they'd be yelling, "Where you going? Where you going?" And I says, I'll be back. So I go up to the Captain Kelly, and he says, he was a little nervous and excited, and he says, "You got any hand grenades?" And I was going to say, "What do you think I got?" You know, but because when I stood, there was a little box right there, where I stood, you know, to stand and be out and looking out through the turret, and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Get some hand grenades." So I went back and I got some hand grenades. We come back, and he says, "We're going to see them windows up there. It's a 2-story building, mind you." See, I remember a lot of the goofy things, and you know, the things that are funny and yet they're not. And I'm thinking to myself, this captain's telling me to throw 2 stories up. I'm going to throw a hand grenade. Okay, here we go. So him and I threw these hand grenades. Well, they missed and they hit the wall. We had to run around the back of the building. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I says, I got a 75 there. I said, I'll go back and have my gunner throw in a couple 75s into the building and you know see what we can do. So we did that. And then Colonel Nick Novosel came out of nowhere. I mean, I couldn't understand where these guys were coming from all of a sudden. Colonel Nick came out around the tracks there, and he yells, he says, "Soki, bring me some smoke, bring all of your smoke grenades." So I took the smoke grenades over, and he says, "No, we know what we're going to do." He says, "We're going to line up all these tanks," and the other tanks started to follow me. There was, I think, all told about 10 tanks, which I remember, that followed me. So he said, "We're going to line these tanks up because we couldn't go across the tracks because they had an 88 set up on the north, east, west on the south side of this 2-story building, and if anybody went across or did anything, they would shoot." So we lined these tanks up, and we took 4 men. We just left the driver in each tank, and then Colonel and I, we would tell the driver, first driver. We'll see. The first driver was my tank, and I told Skills what we were going to do. We're going to throw 2 smoke grenades, and then they'll shoot. They will shoot, and when they shoot, then you gun your motor. First, you gun your motor, and they'll anticipate that you're going across, and then when they shoot, then you go across with the tank. So we did this with each tank, and we got all 10 of our tanks across. So that left 50 men in the back there. So we had to run across. So Colonel Nick and I think Captain Kelly ran across before. After my tank went across, he ran across, and Colonel Nick was throwing the smoke grenades, and we ran across. And my crew and I were the last ones, actually. The 3 other fellas, and we ran across, and there was a cemetery on the right-hand side of us as we were running, with a fence about that high. And we got about halfway running. We were trying to go to where our tanks were because they were out of sight. This is where the confusion was, and which created a lack of communication from then on in. And I heard somebody hollering, "Soki, Soki!" I turned around, and this Colonel Novosel is waving me, and he's pointing to the left or right over there, off the tracks. There was a body laying there, a fellow, one of our fellows laying there, and he was pointing and he was calling me over there. So I told my 3 guys, I says, "Go and find something," I says, "so we can haul the guy." I says, So when I took off, then I seen somebody was shooting, a sniper or something, so I jumped across this fence, and as tall as I was, and I laid on my gut, and I crawled between these tombstones up to the area by the tracks, and then I jumped over the fence and I went over to the fellow that was laying there, and I was shocked to see who it was. It was a good personal friend of mine. I was only 21 when we came into the Army, and he was like 20, 28, 29. He was 30 at that time, and I was 23. And he was Frankie DeMena, and he was from Philadelphia, and he was a muscular fellow, quiet and everything, and he used to like to hang around with me because I used to keep him happy and smiling and telling goofy jokes and all that stuff, you know. And he, like I say, he was dark complected, but I mean, he was snow white. He blended in with the snow. So I told him, Frank, take it easy. He had this all of this thigh here shot out, and it was the main artery was just spritzing blood all over the snow and everything. I said, Frank, just. I got on my knees and in back of him. I put my hand. I said, I'm going to put my hands. I says under your armpits and everything. I says, and you take your hands and put your hands back around my neck. And because he was a heavy guy, and I pulled him down in the snow and all that helped me a little bit. Pulled him down where by the time I got him down, I turned around and my guys were there, and I look and they got a stretcher. But with all the excitement, I mean, I figured I'm not going to bother asking where did you get the stretcher. We was worried about getting this guy, Frankie, on the stretcher. So we got him on a stretcher and we hightailed it back, going back, and we just went to the end of the cemetery. Now you just visualize this. We're going back west, where the tanks went, and the tanks went over in this direction, and there was this road. So we went in that direction. We went just maybe about not even a quarter of a block, and on the right-hand side there was a building, and it had a Red Cross on it, a flag. And I look, and there's my Captain Kelly there, and Nick was still back there, and Lieutenant Orlander from the first platoon, and a couple guys of the crew, and Jimmy Bond. I don't know if you met Jim. You met Jim Bond? Yeah, Jimmy Bond and Dargable and a few of the other guys were all there. And I found out that they went and they somehow captured this aid station, which had two German aidmen, and there was a lieutenant in there, and they had the lieutenant as a prisoner in the kitchen. And there was some fellows already down in the cellar that they were wounded, and they brought in. In fact, we brought in, when we brought what's his name, we took him downstairs over there. And then I went back up, and all I had was, I had the German P-38 pistol that I confiscated, and then I had my what we called a grease gun. It was like a machine gun, and it looked like a grease gun, and shot 45 caliber bullets, and we call it, like I say, grease gun. And I had my gunner and my assistant gunner stationed in a little shanty or a shack. I don't know. They had chickens in there. And these guys said, "We got a couple of chickens here, Soki." They were already anticipating to have chickens, and then there was little holes, openings, in the brick. It was a brick shed, and it looked out into back, and it looked like like an alleyway or something in there. And my gunner was looking out through the doggone thing there, and I looked, all of a sudden I seen three Germans come running out from between two buildings, and I says, "Gulick," I says, "Wally, shoot." He froze. So I pushed him on the side, and I shot up in their direction. The two of them just got around, and just the last one, I think I shot him in the leg or something, and he just hobbled away. And I told him, I says, "Why did you shoot as soon as you seen him?" He didn't know what to say. To this day, he doesn't remember that he rode with me, that he was in my tank, and he lives right about 5 minutes away from me in Florida. So then I went outside, and I met Madrak, Sergeant Madrak from my platoon, and we were talking, in general about some things, it was just don't remember what we were talking about. And all of a sudden, artillery was coming in. I don't know if it was ours or it was theirs. So we hit the deck, so to speak, and something hit me along the back. And I said, "Oh God!" And Ed Madrak says, "What's the matter?" I says, "I got hit in the back." And he looks over and he laughs. He says, "It was the slate roof, the pieces of slate roof that made me back, but I didn't know what it was, So we got up, and I went back into the building, and someone went and set up a 30 caliber. Am I putting my hand in the camera? Somebody put a 30 caliber machine gun on a tripod and looking out the living room window. Well, I mentioned that to somebody. I says, "You guys are doing something wrong." I said, "You're going to bring more firepower on us." I said, "They've got that Red Cross over there, and here you got a gun in this thing. You're not supposed to fire no guns out of this place." So they took it down. Whoever put it up there took it down. And then I went by and I looked, and that German lieutenant, was sitting there, and he smiled at me. So I smiled back at him, And then I went outside, and then we looked, a couple of guys, Dargaville and I, and Captain Kelly, we looked, and we seen a tank coming back from a road from the north direction of the area where we were at the building. And it was moving very slowly. And then it was, I'd say, about 40, 50 yards away from us. The driver jumped out of the tank, and he must have been wounded or something already, and he was staggering and coming slow. And we were saying, come on, guy. And I think he only went about maybe 10 yards or so, and then somebody shot him in the back, because we seen the bullet come out this way and hit him, and he just straightened up and he went down. And then after that, there's a lot of time in between, because this all transpired like from daybreak till dawn is when they decided to surrender. But just before that, what was his name? Colonel Nick Novosel got on the back of the tank, one of the tanks that was right there on the road in front of the building, up ahead of the building, and he was on a microphone calling for help. He was telling them, he used some King's English in a way, and he says, "Give us some artillery, do something, because we it's hell here." And while he was in a process of doing that, evidently they shot it must have been a mortar shell dropped on the back of the motor compartment, and it hit him all over the back, all the shrapnel, everything over the back. He jumped off the tank. So myself, Dargaville, and myself, and I think Captain Kelly, and there was, I think, Jimmy Bond from C Company. We took and helped take him down. We took him down in the basement, the cellar, where they were patching these other guys up already. And then the captain and I were the last ones coming up, and we were halfway up, and he was in front of me. And all of a sudden, I heard a bang, and I would look this way to the side as I was coming up the steps at the side of Captain Kelly, and it just looked like a hole just opened up in the wall, and thick walls, the homes. And all I remember that I just went blank with my eyes, and I felt a pain right up in here, in my area, nose area. And Kelly come flying on top of me. So both of us rolled down the stairway, and they pulled him off of me, and I had blood running here, and a little bit here, and then I opened my eyes, and my eyes were like blurred. So I didn't know what happened. So they start patching me up, and then I could see a little bit better. And then I seen the last I remember what they were doing to Captain Kelly. They were working on his hip area. See, so whatever came through that, it must have been what they called the Germans. Like our bazooka. That's what came through that thing. And I went back upstairs. The captain, that lieutenant, was still sitting there, and he looked at me. And when he seen the patch on my nose and face, he just sort of shook his head, And then I went outside, and somehow or other, while I was gone, my gunner, Gulick, he got hit in the leg. And then this Tom Shaw, they brought Tom Shaw, and he got hit in the leg, which they amputated after in prison. And incidentally, the fellow that I brought down from the tracks, I found out later on that he died. I mean, he lost all that blood. I guess he died over there. And then the captain started calling. He was calling for either Dargavel or myself. So we went down there, and he says, get some white sheet or something. Get something. He says, we're done. He says, and these people are dying here. He says, I'm bleeding. Everybody's, just go out there and surrender. Well, I was hesitating. I was trying to figure out a place that we're going to hide. I'm going to hide someplace, in the cellar, and wait it out. But then another thought came. I don't know if the good Lord said so, no, or what. And I started thinking, well, what if I did stay here, and then they did find me? They might just kill me. So anyway, Fitchik from my tank and Dargavel, they found some bed sheets or something, and they put it on something, and they went out. And I didn't find this out till after, while I was in prison, and Dargavel told us all when we got captured. They start going back towards this area where we were thrown the smoke grenades, because they seen Germans up in that area, and they were waving, Kamerad, like this. And what's his name? There was 3 guys coming. He told me, Dargavel told me, there was a sergeant and two regular privates and Germans. And as they were going in that direction, there was somehow a tank came back. And it was facing back in that area where we just came in. That was the only tank that I remember seeing. And they're here, the tank is here, and those Germans are up ahead. All of a sudden, somebody's shooting out of this tank at those Germans. So the Germans turn around, and they're running away. And Dargavel and Fitchik are running after him, hollering, "Kommen Sie here, Kamerad." So then Dargavel runs to the tank, and he looks who's shooting, and it was a fellow by the name of Jesus Rodriguez. I mentioned his name before. And he was a snafu, believe me. And he started chewing him out. "What are you shooting?" Well, he didn't know. He didn't see them back there. He was shooting because he was protecting himself. So finally, he told him, "Get back in that hatch and stay there." So they went out there and they started running. They finally convinced these Germans to come back. So this sergeant, he was in a rage. He come in there, and he start lining us up against the wall. And I thought he was going to line us up and shoot us. And all of a sudden, who comes out is this lieutenant that we had captured. This is just like in a movie, believe it or not. And he comes out and he walks up to this lieutenant, to this sergeant, and he starts eating him out, so to speak, and telling him, "You don't touch these men. They treated me as a prisoner of war, the way the rules and regulations call for. You're not doing anything to them. They are our prisoners now." And all that. Well, he had to take orders. So then they lined us up in twos. Then they start bringing up the wounded ones, and they were making makeshift stretchers to haul these guys away. They had these old what do you call them? Fences, chicken wire fences. They were ripping them off, making some. And some guys like Gulick was shot in the leg. Got some kind of a branch and something to walk on, and then he leaned on me as we were walking away. But before walking away, they went and searched us for everything. They took one German come up to me and he seen the German weapon that I had. Nix, das ist Deutsch, verboten, you know. That's, you know. He took it away. Then he took other stuff that I had on me. He didn't take my little Bible. My oldest sister-in-law bought me a Bible that had a gold plate on it, and it said "God bless you," you know. And I wore it close to my heart, you know. And he didn't touch that. And then I had a little address book, and it had a lot of maps in there. And I figured, well, they'd see the maps, they would take it away from me. No, they kept it. So that was my diary that I kept when I was in there. And I had a brand new pair of gloves. They were like wool inserts, and then they had a leather, you know, that went over it, and wine colored, you know, nice and warm, you know. Well, the same guy, the German that took my pistol away, he told me to take the gloves off. So brand new gloves, he takes them, and he gives them his, and his were just like the inserts, you know, rag, and one of them on this little finger, it had a hole. So all through the war, when you know, I tried keeping my finger out, but tip of my finger was always freezing. So I kept my finger like this, and that thing was bent in, and I'd walk like this, wherever they marched us, you know, which will be a long story, where they marched us from one camp to the other, and then vice versa. They would put us on these 40 and 8 boxcars and ship us to various camps. Well, anyway, after they did all this, you know, to us, took everything what we had, you know, and when they start moving out, and they took the wounded ones in one direction, and they took us guys that, like, you know, that were capable of walking in another direction. And I remember coming past, it looked like a pillbox or something, and they took a couple of guys in there and they did something to them, and then I didn't see them anymore. And then they took us right on the bank of the Rhine River. And then we laid there on the, you know, we were waiting for a ferry. And in the meantime, I'm laying there, and it was dark already. And the guy comes up to me and he starts speaking to me in Polish, and I speak Polish and I understand him. And he was cursing me up and down, and he was saying that you're crazy, you know, that Hitler's we're gonna win the war and all that. He's just, so I have no alternative. I can't argue back with him. I'm done, right? In the meantime, after I didn't say nothing, so he walked away, and then another German soldier came up to me. He started speaking to me in Polish, and he says, "Don't listen to that crazy maniac. He doesn't know what he's talking about." And he says, "You'll be all right. You'll be fine," he told me. And then he says, you want something to drink? I got a nice hot drink. I said, "Well, you know, thank you." In Polish, I'm thanking him, you know. Dziękuję, you know, I'm saying, you know. So he pulls his canteen that he had, and he pours me a cup of this drink, and I drank it, and I tasted that till this day. It was the most delicious chocolate drink that I ever tasted. I don't know why, but I mean, you know, he gave it to me, you know, and I thanked him, and that was it. And just about then, they pulled up with the ferry. They put us on the ferry, took us across, took us into this town in Germany, called Baden-Baden, B-A-D-E-N. And they put us down. It was a schoolhouse. We went down in the cellar, and I forgot how many of us were down in this. It was like a bomb shelter. And then they came with so it's supposed to have been coffee, because we hadn't had nothing to eat, and we didn't have nothing to drink it out of. So we took our helmets, and they handed it to them, and they poured it in the helmets, and we drank out of it. And honey, if you only knew what we did, we washed our feet in those helmets. We did everything with those helmets. But we drank it, and it wasn't a very nice drink anyway. And we drank that stuff from then on in. And what they say, it wasn't a coffee. It was something like a chicory. Have anybody hear of chicory or something? That's what it was. It was like a synthetic coffee. So the next day they hauled us away, and they hauled us away to the railroad track. And this is my first experience of getting on a 40 and 8, boxcar. They wedged all of us, as many guys as they could in the. They got other ones from someplace else, and they put us in there, and then we drove by train. I'd say maybe about an hour. I think that's about it. And then we got off, and I remember going by this building, by this town, and it was called Stuttgart. And I thought that was where we were going to go. And then they took us to another town adjacent to it, and it was Ludwigsburg. And this camp, at one time they had a lot of Russians, I guess, or something in there. But anyway, we came in and it was empty, and we filled it up with some of our guys, and like I say, they brought other men in there. It was like a reception center for prisoners of war. And then they made you fill out different forms, and then being Americans, I mean, we did something in general always to make a lot of fun or something. Well, we use a little ingenuity too. When they asked you what your occupation was, well, most of them, the guys would say, put down farmer, or put down baker or cook. So you'd be someplace where there's food. So these Germans, they would be scratching their heads and they'd be saying, "The cooking, and farmer. These guys are nothing but, in America, they're nothing but cooks and farmers and bakers." And then they call us in and then they interrogate you. And that was surprising. When I was called in to get interrogated, and this young soldier, and to me he looked like he was a Hebrew, of Jewish, and he had cigarettes over there, and I didn't smoke. Coming in, he had an Oxford English accent, and he's speaking to me, and he says, "And all we do," I say, "Sergeant Felix Sokolowski, and 36383709. My serial number, and that was it. And he says, "What outfit are you with?" And same thing, repeat your name, rank, and serial number. He says, "Oh, well, you don't have to tell me that." He says, we know more than you think we don't. We know. He says, you were with the 12th Armored Division." He says, "And you came on the Santa Cecilia. You landed in Liverpool." But he was wrong there, and all this time he's waiting for myself to change an expression, and I just looked nonchalant, and then he says, "Oh, by the way," he said, "you would wish to have a cigarette?" And I said, "No, I don't smoke." So he asked all these different questions, and I just name, rank, and serial number. He said, "Well, thank you very much," and I left. And then, I also had my eyes treated. And there was a Russian doctor in the camp there that put some eye drops in my eyes and helped my eyes, as far as that goes. Then they took us and they marched us from there. Yeah, they marched us from there about, I'd see, almost a day, because we left at daylight and we went to hill and dale, up and down in the valleys, and we ended up in a place that had maybe about 4 little shacks, barracks, and I remember that the people that were occupying there were Moroccan soldiers that had been captured in Africa, because they had the Moroccans, they had that like tattooed something up there, whatever it is, for the religious thing. And we stayed. They had us staying in there about 4 days in this one barrack, and it was cold. This is like I say, January, because we got captured actually. Some say 17th, and I mean, according to my calendar, I drew up a calendar on my thing, Good thing I did, because I used it in a prison camp. 16th that January 16th is the day that we met the Waterloo. So anyway, they had us there about 3 or 4 days, then back up, out, and again up and down hill and dale through the snow and everything, and got us to the nearest railroad track. And then they piled us in there, and they were just like picking up passengers. When we got on there, we had I don't know how many. We had to take in shifts. So many could sit, so many could stand, so many could sit, so many stand. And then they had a barrel where you had to do your duty, as far as things. And then I remember we were traveling. We traveled about, what was it, a day? I think it was about a day and a half or so. And they would stop and let us go out to relieve ourselves once in a while, something. And I remember we went through one town, and we were stopped. They would see what took us so long. The army, the troops in the freight trains had preference over us. They would sidetrack us, and we had to sit there. That's why it might have been a short jog, And it took us that long to get to our destination. Well, they had us standing over there, and it was by a station, and the people came out, and they were looking, And so Dargable says, "Hey," he says, "Soki, you can speak Polish. Maybe they are, And I said, "Polish?" I said, "These guys they're German, So I'm speaking Polish, and I had that phonetic book on German, and I was working on that. The French I couldn't do too good. So I spoke in there, and they started to spit, so I didn't say nothing. So we ended up in the Stalag 13C in Hammelburg. And we got shipped in there. The first thing they did, they took us in these shower room. Well, we looked, shower room, so I didn't know what they were going to do. Well, we got showers, cold water, and everything. We're supposed to clean us up, put the same dirty clothes on, and everything. And then they took us down, and then they put us in this place. Originally, what it was a cavalry camp or something, and this was a stable where they kept the horses. It was a long brick building with a latrine up on a hill, up on a little hill, an outhouse. And being that I was a non-com, and we went up into the attic of the building, and all the privates and everything, and PFCs and even corporals, they were downstairs. So we stayed there from, well, the last week or so in January till March. Till about like March 29th or something, we stayed in there, and we did a lot of pranks on the Germans, and somebody, usually people ask us what did they feed us. They feed us the minimal to keep you alive to a certain extent, calorie wise, and the menu was in the morning. They'd wake you up and they'd call, They wouldn't call. They just counted how many. You're like 3 in a row, abreast, and then they go down the line and count you off, and then the guy could come from the other end, and we used to pull jokes on him too. The first three guys that run across to the other end, this guy to have one count, and the other guy that went this way had another count, and we'd stand there chewing the insides of our cheeks to keep from laughing, and freezing at the same time, mind you. And then finally somebody yelled, "Cut it out, you guys, that's enough, it's cold, let's get in there." So we'd go in, and they finally get the right count. But then we'd go in, and about an hour later they'd call us out, and they'd come with a big barrel, and they had this big little cart, and they'd give us, it was a little pot. I don't know where they got it, and then I improvised a handle out of some wire that I found, like from a hanger or something, and that was my thing to eat with. And they poured it. The only thing was nice about that chicory or whatever it was nice and warm. drink it, and that was it. Then about 11 o'clock, they'd call us out, and they'd same thing, the barrel, but this time this barrel had potatoes with the skins, and they could just fill that same little container that I would skins. So I would take those skins, the potatoes, and I would save them, because then later on at night they would give us soup, which no one knows what was in that soup. And then when I put the potatoes in there to eat with the soup. We had one time we had another funny incident up in our boudoir. We were eating the soup, and it was dark up there. And a fellow from the 42nd Infantry, he was a Lithuanian guy, with Lithuanian extraction. Rudolanis, he was quite a character, and him and I got along pretty good. And he said, he was eating, and all of a sudden he says, with his accent from Brooklyn, he says, "Chiefs," he says, "look, they got worms in here." So some other guy answered him back. He says, "Today isn't Friday. Catholics had to eat, meat. Today isn't Friday. You can eat meat, It just showed you how you were down and out, despondent, but yet you had the time to try to have a little sense of humor, and all that, So, and then we had a little stove, there, and they would give us briquettes, and they would give us so many per week or so. And if we used them up beforehand, we'd suffer the consequences. We'd freeze or something. But we stayed there, like I say, from the latter part of January to latter part of March. And the reason why we were left from there in March was we were all upstairs. It was late afternoon, and we heard firing, and we could tell when it was our tanks firing. You could tell because you were firing at them yourself, and we heard these noises like tanks firing. So we looked up to our little cubby holes, and up there was like a slope going from us, the camp where the camp had their guards and their towers, and way up the hill they had the officers' stalag where the officers were, and these tanks broke through the barbed wire. They shot up the guards up there in the towers, and then we seen all these officers run out. They ran out to these tanks. And what I heard later on, that these officers just went crazy because them guys had 10-in-1 rations, boxes of 10-in-1 rations. They threw them down. Well, these officers, they were grabbing the food. Then someone told me that Captain Dwyer, he was part Indian. He was from C Company. He was the only one that jumped up on top of one of the tanks and started shooting with the 50 caliber machine gun. He told me about Captain Dwyer. So we were exhilarated. Oh, we're happy. We're going to get liberated. So then darkness came, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We're waiting for somebody to come in and say, "Come on, guys, you're done." Then we went to sleep. We had to sleep on this. On the floor, but they had it was a bit like a big sack, but it had this. Do you remember the dolls? They used to stuff the dolls with looked like straw. I think they called it Excelsior or something, whatever it was. So that was our mattress, and we slept with two, and we shared our blankets. We slept together. I slept with Captain Kelly's gunner, George Merkovich, and to keep warm, we slept. And we were sleeping and tried to sleep. We couldn't sleep. And all of a sudden we heard like horses, clop, 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 moving around. We didn't know what was going on. Then we dozed off. Then it seemed like you just dozed off and daylight came. We woke up. They woke us up. The Germans came running in there. Raus, aufgehen, machen, fertig machen, fertig. It means get out, get out. We went out, what's going on? Nobody knows. First thing you know, they start marching all of us out of the camp. marching us to the nearest track where they could put us on these 40 and 8s again. So we figured, well, gee, maybe there's somebody nearby. So we walked slow. I forgot how many, about like 3 miles or 4 miles. We were just walking like you know, we couldn't walk. Well, we were haggard. We were skin and bone. I went down from 195 pounds to like 138 pounds, you know. And as we were going by, right there, you could see where all the officers were eating the food. There was everything, just the debris was laying all along there. Some of the guys were bending down to see if they could find something, you know. Then these guards would yell at you. So they put us on this train, and they drove us it was another 2 days or whatever, and we ended up in Nuremberg. And Hitler had his big reviewing stadium over there, and they made that into a prison camp. And they brought us in there, and they had barracks, and the ones that had the benefit of the doubt were the flyboys that were shot down, you know, the Air Force. They'd been in there longer, and they had the barracks. Well, we were transits, because they kept shooting us from one area to the other. And they had these long pyramidal tents, if you guys know the real long tents, white tents, in the stadium area itself, you know. And so we slept on the ground in there. And then if you had to go potty, so to speak, I mean, and you had to crawl over, men, we slept like just cattle laying, you know. And finally we went outside, and we were there, I think, like I say, we got there, I think, April 1st, April Fool's Day. And I went out walking where the fly boys were, and I'm looking over across to the barracks over there. And the guy seen, and I had on the back of my tank, I had the Chicago Rapid Transit, you know, painted on. And the guy says, "Are you from Chicago?" I says, "Well, I'm not really from Chicago. I'm from Calumet City, Illinois." And he says, "There's a guy over here that's from Calumet City, Illinois." I said, "He is?" "Yeah." He says, "What's his name?" He says, "Kazak." And I'm thinking, Kazak. Then it dawned on me, in Polish, Kaszak. And when I went to this parochial school, it was a Polish school, you know, but they taught English and Polish. And I was an altar boy, in church with him. Him and I were the two main altar boys. He was from Calumet City, so I told him, "I'll be back tomorrow." Tomorrow. I says, "I'll meet you over here. Tell him to meet me over here." I went back there the next day. There was nobody. See, they moved them out already, and then we got moved out. They marched us out. We left April 3rd on foot, and we went 200 and some odd kilometers all the way to a town of, they called it Moosburg. It was just up ahead, just beyond it was Munich in Austria already. And Würzburg, another town that was Würzburg right up there. I think Würzburg was about 30 minutes away or so. So we went to Moosburg, but on the trip itself, if you want to hear it, you know, as we were marching, when we just started off, we were no more than about an hour out of the stadium and everything. Two P-51s came flying by, and they start strafing. So one of the guards that I was spoke Polish, and I made friends with him. I consoled him. I told him not to worry, the war is going to be over, don't worry about it. They gave him the information that our blacks, you know, the Negroes, well, blacks, were going to come in there and rape their wives and kill the men and do all that, you know. And he was telling this to me in Polish. I said, don't believe it. Don't believe it, you know. So we became friends, so to speak. So when they were strafing, there's another funny one now. When they were strafing, we all took off to the side. We headed for the woods. When we're running, and there was a little creek. Well, this guy's got this gun. He's got the heavy boots, his rifle, and he was an old man. I mean, I'm 77 now, but I don't know how old he was, and I was only 23. In fact, my birthday was coming up the 20th of that month. April, yeah. And he hands me his rifle, and he jumps across the creek. So I grabbed the rifle, I'm holding the rifle, and I jumped across the creek as weak as I am, but I did it, see? And then I handed him the rifle back, you know, and he thanked me in Polish. When I tell that story, they said, why didn't you use it? I said, there were probably no shells in there anyway, you know. So then all of a sudden, the planes went away. So then when we all went back, they had, let's see how many they had. On that march, I think they had like 63,000 prisoners of war. They had, in that camp, which I omitted, they had 63,000 prisoners of war of different nationalities, you know, foreigners and, you know, and British and American, you know. And they marched us over to that camp, and like I told you how long it was, and we slept. It depended on the weather. We'd sleep out in the off the road and in the fields, and with sharing the blankets, two guys. Or mostly what they try to do, they try to get us to sleep in a farm barn with in a big hay barns. That was nice. You crawl in the hay, but believe me, we had lice galore. I mean, our clothes were loaded with lice. So we, like I say, we went down the line that way, and it took us from April 3rd, and we arrived at our destination in Moosburg on April the 19th. Because I remember the next day was my birthday, so the fellas got together from they got Red Cross parcels, which we didn't get too many of them, actually, to the whole ball of wax when you know, the camps that I was in. And if you did get a Red Cross parcel, they were supposed to be for one individual. You had to share it among it. Depend how many they had issued, and they wanted to cover everybody. They might be the least amount that I heard at one time. There would be like for 4, but then it generally would be 6 or 8 guys. You'd have to share this thing, and you'd have to cut this and this and this. And the funny part of it, there was always a box of raisins. There were cigarettes in there. See, I didn't smoke, and some of these guys, they were starving, but they would smoke. I would use the cigarettes for food. You want a cigarette? Okay, I'll take your food. Here's cigarettes. You know, survival of the fittest. This is what it worked. See. So anyway, the funny part it comes to the raisins. The guy would be counting off the raisins, and then when it came, there was just some odd pieces, raisins left. He'd cut them in half to distribute them. Then we used to get. Oh, I forgot this. We used to get a loaf of bread. And then we'd have to share it. It was black bread. I think 2/3 of it was sawdust. And they would issue it to one person that would be the guy that would get the bread. And then he'd be in charge of it. And then to be fair, and they would say, well, this is for 8 men or it's for 10 men, you know, to slice it up or whatever it was. So we'd draw cards. Don't ask me where the guys got a deck of cards. And they draw cards, and you know, the high number, the ace of spades would get the choicest bun. You know, then they cut it in various ways, and you get the bread, and you get, you know, save it and eat it when you got your soup or something, whatever it is, you know. But well, anyway, we got in, and these guys made me what we call a Kriege. Kriege means war in German, and Kriegsgefangen means prisoner of war. They made me a Kriege cake for my birthday, my 24th birthday. I'll never forget that. And they sang happy birthday to me and everything. Well, we stayed in that camp. We got there the 20th. We were there like 9 days. No, the 29th, we were outside looking towards the city, the village of, or hamlet or whatever it is, of Moosburg. And as we were looking, see, they had their flag up there. And then all of a sudden we seen the flag come down, and all of a sudden we seen the American flag going up. because we had heard tank fire again in that direction. But I said, they're surrendering. They had the flag upside down, which meant surrender. Oh, then we said, oh, all of a sudden they looked, the flag came down, it turned around, it went back up. Then we started cheering. Then all of a sudden we heard guys talking. They came from inside where the barracks were. They come running, and they said that Patton came into their barracks area, and they told him, he says, you are now free people, but you'd stay here. And the British took over. They were in camp there. They always took over. They went and became guards, you know. And that was the 29th. And they said, don't leave the camp. Well, Rudelanis, you know, he's an instigator. He said, come on, let's go into town, the next day. I says, how are you going to get into town? Don't worry. Hey, look, he's got wire clippers. He had wire clippers. I dasn't even ask him where he got wire clippers. He got the wire clippers, and he clipped the thing, and there was 4 of us. We clipped, and the guys yank, hey, yoink, no, I yoink. The guard, they were supposed to be a guard, you know. They didn't have no weapons or nothing. They were just, you know, and he cut a hole, and we took off. We went across this field to the town, and I would say it was at least about 1.5 miles, or close to 2 miles or so, you know. I mean, to us, mileage, because we were so weak. But we got into town. Am I talking too long?
I'm just checking the tape, but I think you're fine.
Well, anyway, we got into town, and the 14th Armored Division came through there, and, you know, and I had that Chicago transit deal, and the guy said, jumped out, the tank commander jumped out. He said, where are you from, Chicago? I said, I'm from Cal City. He says, yeah, he says, I'm from north side of Chicago, you know. And he was the tank commander. He says, you guys starving? And I says, well, a little bit. What do you think? He said he threw down a box of C rations, or 10-in-1 rations. But then before that, he went in, and I went with him, and we went into a little place that was a store. And we found they had their basement loaded from the ceiling to the top with Red Cross parcels, instead of giving it to us. But anyway, then we went back. We got the box. Took us, I don't know how long, to go back to the camp to carry that, you know. And then we shared it with as many guys we could over there. And then most of us got the GIs, you know, because our stomachs are pretty shrunk. And, you know, if you eat too much of anything, I mean, you get sick, especially the chocolate stuff. And we stayed there till the 6th of May, and then they drove us to Regensburg, put us on the C-47s over to Liège, Belgium, on trucks to Namur. Then they went in Namur. We stayed there, I think, a week, and they told us not to eat anything. They'll feed us a bland diet. And then after that, we went to Camp Lucky Strike. We stayed there another 2 weeks, and then Eisenhower come in there and said, what do you guys want? We want to go home. Well, we don't have enough of transportation. And then somebody said, we'll double up. And he said, that's a good idea. Are you willing to double up? So they put us on the SS Admiral Benson, doubled us up, put us on there, and we took off and made it in 8 days back home. And I'll tell you, when we seen the old lady up there with that torch, it was something to see. And we were home. Sorry. Yeah, so we got home, stayed there, and it was a wee hours in the morning, and a colonel came in this rec room and greeted us. told us that tomorrow morning we'd be put on trains and shipped to various areas that where we're going. And he said, you'll have breakfast. And he said that they said, one thing we want you to do, you're prisoners of war. We have German prisoners working in the kitchen serving food. So they anticipated that we would create a riot or something. We said, no, we won't, get us home. So we got home. I got a 63-day convalescent furlough. Ended up, got married. In between there, in July the 21st, 1945. And then in August, then I was shipped to Fort Sam Houston. I was at the Brooks Hospital. From there to Fort Benning. Then I stayed in Fort Benning, and I was in charge of a tank training battalion for about a month. And I was crying to them. I said, hey, I got enough of points to get out. When am I getting out? So one of my buddies says, I got a car, and I got enough of points. And they said, if your wife is there or if you got a car, you can get this discharge right there. So we lied. I lied because he had the car. And we got discharged. And I came home. That was November the 1st when we got discharged. And then we got home, and then I lived with the in-laws, and I got myself a job December the 1st working for Sinclair Refinery, and then I worked there 6 months. My wife had our first baby boy in April the 5th, and then I went and quit. I quit when the baby was only 2 weeks old. I quit, and then I come home. She said, well, how come you quit? I said, I'm tired of digging the ditches over there and everything. So she says, you'll have to find another job, and that's it. So I did. We found another job 3 weeks later in another refinery, Standard Oil Company. Worked in Standard Oil Company for 17 years. Then they start cutting back on everything. They changed to Amoco, and I was a pipe fitter there. I went to school there, became a pipe fitter. And then they were laying us off, and they gave us an alternative, that they might call us back, or you would take a severance, And I says, well, I'll take the chance. I'll take the severance. So they gave me $1,400 for 17 years of work in there, and here I am. I'm 40 years old, and I've had 3 children by that time. The baby was just born, the youngest one. And didn't have a job. Finally, I worked for the State Highway Department for a while in the office as communications, and then I got into politics. I was president of the Democratic organization. I worked myself up from secretary to vice president and president, and after that, I ran for a councilman one time. I lost. Then the second time I ran, a couple years later, I won, and I served term. That's a councilman or alderman, they called it, for 4 years. I did what I wanted to do for my neighborhood, and then while I was alderman, the next 4 years later, when the election was coming up, the mayor asked me, and he was from the opposition side. He asked me to run for city clerk on his ticket. And I ran against a woman who was a personal friend, and she was a Democrat. And but see, there was nonpartisan elections there in the city, actually. And then she beat me by 250 votes. And then I finally, like I say, worked for the State Highway Department. After the State Highway Department, the mayor called me in when I was yet alderman, but he called me in. He says, how about you taking over as a water superintendent? We haven't had a water superintendent since 1936. And everything was falling apart. With your background in pipe fitting and plumbing, and also working on the processing units, so I took that. I worked in there 15 years, and then at the age of 58, with the new mayor, we couldn't get along. I mean, he wanted things done that I did underhanded and I didn't appreciate, and so to speak. And I ended up retiring, and I've been retired ever since. It'll be 20 years in 19. Let's see, what is yeah, it's 20 years now. No, next year, because I retired in 1979 in May. So next year will be 20 years that I'm retired. And that's all in a nutshell, hon.
It's a big nutshell.
Yeah,
Oh man, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I hope I did it right.
You did perfect.
And whoever's going to see this in general in the future, I hope you enjoy what I just got through saying.
Yes, it will be well appreciated. It is. Let me turn off the camera.